Well, hey, folks, welcome back. We are here for another session as we take a journey across the country visiting with folks in the UMC ecosystem that are involved with the Native American Ministries Sunday movement. We have 6 special Sundays, as you probably know, in the UMC. One of them is celebrated typically in April. There's one that's either April or May. That time frame is the typical time of the year that we celebrate Native American Ministries Sundays in churches. And today I'm fortunate to have Gregory Douglas with us for the conversation. Welcome to the show, Gregory.
Thank you.
So this is one of those coast-to-coast conversations. I'm on the East Coast, and you're in the sunny Los Angeles area. Really happy to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement, which is actually unique from the very start, that you are not pastoring in just one church. You're associated with more than one ministry. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing out there in Los Angeles.
All right. Well, I'm pastor here at Native American United Methodist Church of Southern California, which is based in Anaheim, not too far from, as you said, sunny Disneyland. Yeah. And that's the main congregation where I serve here, where a lot of the ministry occurs from. It really becomes kind of a base that we work from. Then I also have a fellowship in downtown Los Angeles that actually meets at United American Indian Involvement's community room. And that's a very different group, very different population, but is supported by the Anaheim Church and is a part of that. So every so often, in fact, when Fifth Sundays come around, we get everybody together.
Oh, that's really great to hear. That's great. And you are unique in that jurisdiction also, that you're one of the few that has Native Americans actually within the congregation in your community, correct?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that. What is the makeup of your congregation?
Well, the makeup of the congregation is predominantly Native American and a variety of tribes and nations that make up the church. So there isn't any one particular group, especially here in the kind of Los Angeles, Orange County area. And we're in an area that both congregations really meet in, where there are no trust lands or reservations.
Right.
And so a lot of the folks either were relocated or their families came here and stayed here, or have come here for a variety of reasons. Plus the California groups that are here that often people, don't know are still here. And so that makes up a very interesting mixed congregation and makes for a lot of fun.
That's great to hear. And so how long have you been pastoring there?
I've been pastoring here for 8 years.
Okay. Sounds good. And so one of the things that we want to talk about today is the actual Sunday, because there are thousands of churches out there that just have not taken that first step of hosting and celebrating the Native American Ministries Sunday. And so from that vantage point, many pastors and church leaders just literally have not seen what it looks like. So could you give us an example of what it might look like in your church, or what it might look like in another church that may not have Native Americans as part of the actual community at such a high percentage as you do in yours?
Okay. Well, I'll give you a couple examples. One, because the Native American Ministries Sunday offering really gets kind of split between national ministries, and half of that stays local. So for us locally, it enables us to not only provide support, scholarship, transportation, whatever it might be, for some of our folks to go to training events. Some of them go to Native American lay speaking events. They go to a variety of ways where they just gather together, so they're not only connected nationally, but can help share stories, learnings. We also have quite often we have a man come here, Casey Church, who used to be a part of our national offices. And he was supported, as well as other people are supported, through Native American Ministries Sunday through the scholarship funds. And now, in fact, recently he graduated with his doctorate in missiology, and is going to be teaching, in a sense, I think, a historic class in Fuller Seminary in Pasadena. He'll be starting to teach a course on Native American contextual ministry.
Fantastic. That is fantastic. And so during an actual Native American Ministries Sunday worship service, what are some of the elements that might change from the norm for a given UMC church that's hosting it? Is it the sermon? Is it just the offering plates? Are there other things that happen in a church that I want you to help give some creative ideas to pastors to see what this might be at their church?
Right. Well, what I've known, people have invited sometimes members of this congregation to go speak in their churches, either to share their personal stories, how did they come, here, sometimes how they became a part of the United Methodist Church, and sometimes within the Native American community, it's very important to listen to them and how they even became Christians, because there's still a lot of issue and friction sometimes between what's considered the traditional folks or the Christians. And so this church tries to bridge that. And so a lot of our folks will go out and share their stories. We have storytellers that are members of the congregation. We have others who are teachers, sometimes even within the powwow community for the various dances. They don't just go out and share, well, here's what the dance looks like. They go out and share what's the meaning behind. And they really want to share the spiritual meaning behind many of these things. I know of another church within this conference, they invited one of the writers and speakers on the book American Genocide, the California Indian Catastrophe in the United States. And they really took some time to not only learn the history of where we live, but others could do the same. What is the history of where they live, and then what is the connection of the church to those peoples who call that place home?
Wow. Now, one of the things that I hear from many churches and pastors that have a lot of Native Americans as part of the congregation is that on Native American Ministries Sunday, usually that's not the highest date of attendance, but that's a low date of attendance because people are going out to be guest speakers at other sister churches around the area. Is that something that happens at your church as well?
Yeah, that sometimes happens as well. Unfortunately, we haven't had, I'd say over the past 3 years, we haven't had as many requests for speakers. So we usually, go ahead and celebrate that. We have had times, though, where we've had enough people going out that we just moved our celebration to another day.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
And let me just hear from your perspective. I know the answer already, but we just want to say it as a formality. Do you look at those invitations for your church members to speak at other churches? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Is that something that you encourage, or something that you just think that's not a distraction to your ministry?
Oh, no, great thumbs up. I much prefer people going out to speak somewhere else and sharing not only their story, but the Native American ministry story, especially connected to, us specifically as United Methodist Church. We've been going through acts of repentance, but we've often found that many congregations or conferences, have done a little, but haven't really followed through greatly. So I'd much rather folks have the opportunity to go out and share the story, share a witness, if you will, and be outside of this congregation so that other people can gain a connection rather than just staying here.
Yeah, and I believe there's something like 140, almost about 150 officially designated Native American churches in the UMC system across the country, and you don't need to be officially designated. One of the notions we're trying to dispel is that there are actual Native Americans spread across the country in almost every community. Right. We were talking with a pastor in Chicago recently that cited statistics, and just it was surprising for them originally and others in the area that there are Native Americans amidst almost all the major metropolitan areas across the country. And so finding a church and reaching out to a pastor like yours, even blind, as a cold call from one UMC church to another, is something that we're trying to encourage, because largely, I would say almost all the pastors we've talked to receive it just like yours, with open arms, willing to share and be generous with the story and the culture and the connection.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's important, I think, to share is not just the surface level sharing of, what the foods might be, or the dance, or the art, or the culture. What is some of the deeper meaning that you think is important that churches and church leaders or pastors really need to think about it with intentionality when they host the Native American Ministries Sunday? What are they trying to teach their people? What are they trying to lead their people to really understand in relationship with this topic at hand?
Well, I think one of the biggest things to understand about Native American ministry overall is we've had a great misunderstanding that many of the people felt that their culture, language, many of the things needed to be removed or wiped out in order to become Christian. I often try to share with folks that was not only a misunderstanding, but a misuse of, if you will, power or influence. People were not given the time to understand what were their understandings. We as United Methodists believe, in what we call prevenient grace. God is already there, present, active, and working. And these are great people that, like Stephen Charleston, an Episcopal bishop in Choctaw man, shares. So we already had a covenant with God. We already had a covenant with Creator. But now, as a Christian, we get to see Him face to face. And so they need to understand that people don't need to have everything removed from them. They need to allow that context to be celebrated and brought into their ministry. And I think many of the people could go out and share that not only with other churches, but help them understand maybe how to read the Bible in a way they hadn't read it before. Maybe how to see the world in a way they hadn't seen it before. How to see time in a way they had not thought about it before. And I think it would enrich their faith, as well as inviting those Native American members to come in as brothers and sisters.
That's a great perspective. Now, one of the things that I think is just so vibrant about this is that just celebration of diversity in the church and the history that the United Methodist Church has had with Native Americans, that it's not just a fad, it's not just something that happened in the last couple of years, but this relationship and support and inclusion has been happening for a long period of time. From your perspective, what would you say to somebody who is asking why is the UMC involved with Native Americans? Why, if we have 6 special Sundays, why is one of them dedicated to Native Americans?
Right. Well, I think we have to start from a very long history of we're working with a people who in many ways are in exile in their own land and who have not only been pushed out, relocated, forgotten, sometimes invisible, but a group that needs that dedication, someone that needs to be able to say, that there is a responsibility for some of that within the church and within the nation. And so there's often people who not only need support, but the scholarships especially help people then go to school in ways that they could not attend before. It allows Native Americans who are often scattered all over the place. Like here within Southern California, you could say, well, there's 400,000 Native Americans in Southern California. Well, just the city of Anaheim has a larger population. Right. So people get very scattered. So it's important for them to have enough support to be able to get together, whether it's at a meeting in Oklahoma, a meeting in New Jersey, or a meeting out here on the West Coast. It's very important for those folks to gather, see each other, and have that identity renewed. And the United Methodist Church, to support that, it plays a very important role, and it says something very important to those people that we're here to support this. There's a lot of other things that happen. Recently, there were areas where people needed kind of disaster support. Yeah. When the United Methodist Church steps in and enables that to happen, it creates a much improved and better relationship as Christians to people who have not always had the best of relationship with the Christian church.
That's so interesting. Now, what about witnessing opportunities to other Native Americans? Is that something that your church is involved in as well?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in community events, especially in Southern California. It's very important for the community to get together, and especially at powwows. And so I'm there often enough that sometimes I'm dubbed the powwow pastor. And for a while I thought it was kind of cute, but then I realized that it was more serious than I was taking it. Yeah. Vendors and dancers and participants were talking to me and saying, will you pray with me? Will you talk with me? We were having personal, spiritual conversations. Sometimes a vendor would say, it's good that you stopped by. Now you got to go see so-and-so. I realized suddenly I was making pastoral calls. And then what would happen is something happened within a family. Like I went to visit my mother one Christmas, Got up there Christmas night, right after services here, and I got a call immediately, mother has passed away. We need you to come and offer prayer for her and the family before one else gets here. So I turned around and drove back and got to that family's home about 1:30 in the morning.
Wow.
I realized how important that was. And so we need to be, in a sense, involved more out in the community and available to people who have often either been ignored or told what they're doing is wrong.
Now, you've mentioned many benefits so far, and the one of the significant portions is the offering plate that we across the connection are able to gather funds together to use it in efficient ways and disperse it. And half of it is kept locally. Can you tell us maybe what the number one or number two benefit that you've seen in terms of that reinvestment back into your community? Has there been any examples that, whether it's specifically for any of your congregants or any of the programs or trainings or anything like that, what's the number one or two things that you can say that, wow, because of this offering and this financial support, we've been able to do X, Y, Z, and that's just so life-serving that it's something not worth ignoring at all.
Right. Well, I think at times one of the great benefits for us is, now I mentioned, Casey, who's now going to be teaching at a seminary. I think without that support, that entire beginning of a ministry in the seminary would not have occurred. For us, very much as a local congregation, we're enabled to now send people to events across the country that we would not be able to send them to at all. I just invited a young woman today who's looking at working on her Juris Doctorate, and she's looking specifically in areas of tribal law. And so there's an event happening here in Southern California within San Diego County, and I offered to tell her, well, if you need assistance to be able to attend, pay the registration, pay to stay there, because otherwise she would not be able to do that, then we, through our Committee on Native American Ministries, will support you. We wouldn't be able to do that without the funds through Native American Ministries Sunday.
That's just amazing to hear those types of things that are happening with such meaningful returns and impact. So thank you so much for that. Now, there's so many things that people can do on an actual Sunday if they host it. For those that are doing it for the first time, what's one fundamental suggestion, advice, tip that you can give to a pastor or church leader that's planning it for the first time? Whether it be on the framework or the mindset, whether it be logistics, whether it be content, what's the one really gold piece of a nugget that you can give them?
Well, I think probably on content, the one thing I would suggest that they do is consider kind of getting a focus, because there's so many things you could focus on. Let's say here in Southern California, maybe they want to look at what is California's history with California Indians. They might want to look instead of, what are the folks that are within our area that, maybe invite one person to come and share. What is your relationship to the church? We just recently here as a church invited two gentlemen to come here from Arizona. One's Tohono O'odham and one was Akimel O'odham. One gentleman shared here his story, and he said, my relationship with the church was not always positive. He said, but when I saw you guys bring in a pipe, you brought in the sage, you brought in things that you placed on an altar that are very important and sacred to us. He said, I was in shock. And he admitted to our congregation, he said, I'm leaving. I came here to speak to you, but I'm leaving here with a new sense of connection myself. So I think for other congregations can do some of the same things, maybe not on the same scale, but they can make a connection in one way that would not only impact that congregation, but the person they invite.
That's absolutely great advice. As we close out the interview, if somebody here today is leaning forward and saying, hey, I think it's time for our congregation to get involved, to start the process of planning. If they want to reach out to you for a question or two, what's the best way that they can do that? How can they contact you directly?
They could either call me or they could email me. Either way is fine.
can you give out some contact information? Because you were part of the Native American UMC in Southern California, right? So
Right.
What might be the best way to do that? Either an email address or a phone number that you can give out?
Well, you can get a hold of me through my personal email, which is greatscottrev@aol.com. Just spell it out, GREATSCOTTREV@aol.com, or call my cell phone, 626-327-5193.
Really appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy with your ministry, and appreciate the time that you took to step in and just visit with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
And so everybody out there, thank you for listening into our conversation. Please, if you're one of those church leaders or pastors that are thinking about trying out the process of planning and hosting a Native American Ministry Sunday, we encourage you to try. One of the great first steps that you can do is visit the United Methodist Communications download kit and page for pastors that has tons of different resources available for you to download for free. Remember, you can order envelopes and offering envelopes and bulletins and posters from UMCOM as well. Thank you so much. Please leave your comments below. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's discussion and the questions and things that have opened up your eyes to this specific Sunday program and the ministry as a whole. I'm Kenny Jahng. Thank you so much for listening in. Till next time, be well. Again, thank you so much, Gregory, for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, hello, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are doing this journey across the country, virtually, across this internet, and using video conferencing to visit with friends across the United Methodist Church ecosystem, or community as we call it. And one of the things that we're trying to do with this journey here is to talk about Native American Ministries Sunday. It's one of the 6 special Sundays, as you probably know, that we celebrate in the United Methodist Church. And we want to bring on some pastors and church leaders that have actually been involved with the ministry and have had experience hosting an actual Native American Ministries Sunday, so that you get a sense of what it takes to plan and host and actually bring your congregation forward in terms of getting involved with this program. Today, I've invited Sue Debris from Montana. Welcome to the show, Sue.
Thanks. It's great to be on with you and share some thoughts.
So we are looking at Native American Ministries Sunday, and I know that you in Montana are actually quite involved with the UMC system. So let's just start right there, because I think you lead a quite busy life there, Sue, in Montana. In fact, not just one ministry. You've got multiple ministries going on. Why don't you let us know a little bit about where in Montana you're located and the different ministries that you're associated with today?
I'm serving 3 small rural congregations in southwest Montana. I live in Sheridan, Montana, and start worship there at 8:30 on Sunday mornings, and then I go down the road to Twin Bridges and serve there, and then up the hill a little bit to Whitehall, Montana. So these are 3 small ranching communities in the southwest corner of Montana, close to Yellowstone Park, and beautiful, beautiful part of the country.
Now, have you been a lifer in Montana?
Almost. I started out in Connecticut, but I grew up in a small community up on the Flathead Reservation, and I think growing up there is one of the things that's really stirred my interest in trying to support the Native American ministries, because from the time I was 8 years old, then lived on the Salish Kootenai Reservation, grew up there, had many friends, and saw a lot of the things going on and how the church can be part of strengthening communities.
That's fantastic. And it's actually a very unique experience. I'm glad you're bringing that to the table today. So let's talk about the 3 different churches, or even just 1 or 2 of them. First of all, I'm assuming that you do celebrate Native American Ministry Sunday at 1 or all of those congregations?
We're planning to do it at all 3, and I have maybe a little different approach in each one of them. But we're using the basic information that is provided by the church. I think there's some good stories in there and good basic things. We don't have video equipment right now in those churches, so we won't be using some of the things that are provided, but I really appreciate the variety of materials that they have and the stories that go along with the offering envelopes and the posters and things.
Yeah, I think so. You're referring to United Methodist Communications offers free printed envelopes and bulletins and things that you can order from UMCOM. And then on the UMCOM website, there's a huge download kit for pastors and church leaders that just has a plethora of resources that you can download, print, or use in emails and on your website, et cetera, et cetera. I'm glad that you're taking advantage of some of that. You mentioned that you're doing a little bit of a different thing for each of the different ministries. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, in one of the congregations, one of the people in the church actually teaches Native American studies at the university down the road, Montana State University in Bozeman. So I'm picking her brain to get some ideas from her. And then we have a very active United Methodist ministry on the Blackfeet Parish here in Montana in the Yellowstone Conference. And so I'm pulling up a lot of information from the pastor there who happens to be a Navajo. And I think I need to check with him to see if he's been a recipient of some of the funds that are provided. But I know that the ministry there has been a recipient. And so to try to personalize it beyond the materials that we receive, try to get some more stories from our own conference of what's going on, and then utilizing that and kind of backing up the other information. I usually try to take, several minutes out of the worship time, but I also try to publicize it ahead of time and just tell some more of our own stories as much as I can.
With the proximity and I guess maybe we should even back up. What percentage of your congregation actually come from the Native American heritage? Is there a significant portion of the population, or is that something that just is tangential, et cetera? What does it look like in your congregation?
The communities that I'm serving right now are largely Caucasian. And so I don't have anybody in the congregation that has Native American heritage right now. In some of the places that I've worked, we have had, and when I do, I try to involve them in the planning and what kinds of things would you like us to know about you and about what's happening in the Native American community right now in our state. And if there isn't somebody directly in the parish, I've had pretty good luck sorting some folks out through friendship connections that we've got. And one of the congregations, the last one that I served, there was an older couple in the church that when we started to talk about Native American Awareness Sunday, they were all over it. He takes pictures down at the Crow Agency of their big celebration every year. And she's very involved with some of the folks. And we were able to invite a teacher from the Crow Agency to come up and just share with us some of her story during worship. So trying to find personal connections and giving people a platform to tell their own stories, whether they're a member of the congregation or a community or some kind of a good personal human connection. That's
so important, right? To make sure that the message does get across, that it doesn't fall flat in any program that you have. I really think that's and I love the fact that you're trying to contextualize even because it's busy managing the messaging and the liturgy and the worship for 3 different churches. You could have taken a cookie cutter approach, and yet you're taking that extra step to contextualize it for each of those communities, which I think is fantastic. So one of the things that we're asking some of the pastors is, from your perspective, what's your objective with the community, especially if some of the congregations are largely Caucasian and they don't have a big proportion of the congregation as Native Americans? What is your big picture objective? What are you trying to do? What's the net takeaway that you think by hosting and bringing this program forward? What do you think what are you trying to get out of it for your people?
Well, there are several things. One is that when we participate in these special offerings, we're part of a much bigger picture, and that we, together with other United Methodist congregations across the world, can make a bigger difference than if we just individually try to do our own little thing. I'm trying to help people find ways to connect to the information, but also in relational ways to the human beings that are behind these stories. And some of it is maybe being aware of our own racism sort of things that are still part of our state too. and understanding on a larger picture where Native Americans are with some of the things that they're dealing with, and appreciating the wonderful people that are part of this community, and how we can all be much richer together. I have a poem that I collected when I was teaching school in a Native village in Alaska, and I've kept it in front of me forever. It says, "The lands around my dwelling are more beautiful from the day when it is given me to see faces I have never seen before. All is more beautiful, all is more beautiful, and life is thankfulness. These guests of mine make my house grand." And it's, I put it together in a shadow box with items that came from different places, from Alaska where I taught, and the Flathead neighborhood where I grew up, and other places that are meaningful to me. Just that sense that as we get to know the stranger, the person that's different from us, that our life is more beautiful and richer for that. So appreciating what's going on, what a little bit of what the history is, and what we can bring to each other to make life more rich for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. That's fantastic. I love that poem, and I love that sentiment. I think it's something, as we celebrate the diversity within the church and just within our communities, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Now, one of the things that a lot of pastors who are considering jumping on board is, what do we do with the youth? Is there an opportunity there? Sometimes the youth are much more open to different messaging and differences in culture. Do you have any suggestions for how pastors might involve the youth or expose the youth in this type of occasion?
Right now, most of the churches that I've been serving, unfortunately, haven't had a lot of youth, but I am thinking, not necessarily on the Sunday, but with our youth in this conference, we've been able to do a lot of things at camps, our youth during the summertime. And actually, 2 of my grandchildren are Native American too. So letting them tell some of their stories and experiences. And that's, of course, picking on my own grandchildren. But they've had some pretty hard experiences too, even when my granddaughter was only 10 years old and traveling across Montana and wasn't allowed to go in and use a bathroom because she was too dark.
Wow.
And that's only 10 years ago. So we're not talking back in the civil rights days.
That's amazing. That's shocking, actually.
It really is. And I think when people recognize, some of the painful things that are still happening, and the kids have a chance to tell about some of the things that have happened to them, there's some walls that come down, and it gives people something to think about. And a chance to say I'm sorry too, even.
So for congregations that are embracing this, and I think this is great that your congregations in particular are part of that, what can a congregation do beyond this specific Sunday, right? So the Sunday is about awareness, and it's a time to pause and actually pay attention to this culture and then the history of the UMC embracing and supporting Native Americans, and it's been a part of who we are as a people. But in terms of healing and in terms of progress, what are some of the other things you think that a congregation can do that this might kickstart and start that conversation internally? Are there things that are on your mind or things that you can suggest in terms of a discussion with other pastors that you might suggest?
I think it's really important for pastors to all know what's happening in their own conference as far as CONAM goes and things like that. With Native American Ministries, what are the things that are going on in our own conferences and who's involved and what's happening. With the Rocky Mountain Conference, we've had a special process going on for repentance with the Sand Creek Massacre, and it led to a very large event at our last general conference that our Bishop, Elaine Stanofsky, was able to to work through with some of the leaders from the Northern Cheyenne tribes. And so that was a huge thing that happened beyond our local congregations. I think even like in our state, Montana has got many Native American people. I think we have about 7% of our population are Native American. And so encouraging people to find out what's going on with our legislature. We have 17, I believe, people running for our state legislature this time that are from Native American tribes. What are their issues? What are their interests? If going to the legislature, if it's possible, and visiting on the day when people come together and give a State of the Tribes address, and they will come in certain amount of regalia and music and things, and then these very wonderful leaders will stand up and just share, here's what's happening with education now. We're so glad that Montana has a Native Education for All program, things like this that we can find out about and support. And then where their concerns are too, that they run out of money for the health clinics before the end of October or whatever it is, where are things that we could maybe help just add our voices to theirs to help encourage and support. So those are just becoming generally more aware of what's going on in our own areas and being a part of the conversation and learning, being willing to just listen, is so big. So good, so good.
So one of the things that it's of interest always with communities that do have, so like you said, I think about 7% are Native American across the state. Do you already have other activities that bring out the culture for Native Americans within your church? What does that look like? Or is it something that is just part of everything, is woven into the fabric of everything that you do?
I think with each church and community, it takes time to figure out where or how things can be woven in. But when I have opportunities just within the preaching or the worship or whatever, if there's something that's appropriate to weave in to the worship, I will do that. And well, things like Veterans Day, and how many of our Native American, how many people from the Native American tribes have been veterans. Mm-hmm. And when they have their powwows, and that's the honor dance that starts the powwow, and appreciating, the service. So different places and times throughout the year to try to raise that awareness. And I think the 7% number is true for Montana. I'm not sure across the United States. I don't think it would be 7%.
Right. Definitely may not be. Yeah. But so one of the other things that part of the Sunday, the special Sunday, is the sacrificial offering, and that 50% of that stays locally within your conference and districts. And could you share a little bit about some of the things that goes to? A lot of people are wondering what happens with that. We're collecting an offering at our church. We're sending it in dutifully with our obligation, with a life-serving posture, and we want to just understand what happens with that. What good comes out of that? Do you have any examples of things that are really impactful or meaningful that comes out of that?
Well, I know that the recipient in our conference is that Blackfeet parish. And so I was thinking it would be probably good for me to talk to the pastor there, Calvin Hill, and just find out specifically where they use that money, because I don't know exactly. I know ministries that they have going on up there, and that he's been really effective in starting some new things and working with the people. They've started a veterinary clinic, like a horse clinic sort of thing. They're doing a summer camp meeting kind of thing for about 3 or 4 days in the summer, and they've got 2 people from the community there that are Native American Blackfeet who are working on the first steps towards ministry. So, and
That's
Calvin
great.
himself was working towards his doctoral, and so I know that these funds go towards scholarships too.
Yes, absolutely.
Native
Scholarships and education is definitely a big component about
Yeah.
what we're trying to do to push this and pay it forward.
Yeah, and then we just had a huge response from UMCOR up there because they were inundated with tons of snow, 240 inches of snow this
Yes.
year. And UMCOR came through with a $10,000 grant, and of course that's a different thing, but still it's an example of how the church working together can
Definitely.
provide
Definitely. Yeah, and
support.
UMCOR Sunday is one of the special Sundays as well. It's just
Right.
part of the beauty of the denomination, right? The connectionalism allows us to pool our resources together and have focused efforts in ministry that just is not available to other denominations or other structures or even independent churches. I think it's one of the beautiful parts of the UMC structure. This is a great snippet or a snapshot into what's going on in your corner of Montana. If someone here today is really interested in taking that next step or just has some curiosity, some questions about what you guys are doing, what would be the best way for someone to get in touch with you directly?
With me directly as a person, I would just say my email probably.
Okay. Could you share that with us? How would someone reach out to you?
It's SU, short for Susan, dot Debree, DEBREE, 70 at gmail.com.
Okay,
So
perfect.
sue.debree70 at gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate you spending the time and sharing with us just the vibrant things that you guys are doing in the name of Native American ministry. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sue.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
And so everybody else watching and listening in today, we encourage you to keep those comments flowing. Let us know what your questions are, what your reflections are. Some of the comments that we've seen is just how proud you are that the UMC is able to do this. And we urge you to keep on looking at all the resources that are available from United Methodist Communications at the Pastor Download Kit on the main website at umcom.org. And we're going to continue our journey next time with another pastor as we trek across the country, learning about all the different beautiful things that UMC churches are doing for Native American Ministries Sunday. Thank you for checking in, and we'll catch you here next time. Thank you, Sue, for being with us today.
Thank you, Kenny. Bye now.
Well, hey, everybody. Kenny Jahng here with our journey across the country, learning more about the Native American Ministries Sunday that the United Methodist Church has in terms of hosting a special Sunday, but more about the actual ministry with the Native American community. Today, we've been able to book as a partner in crime in terms of the conversation today, Gene Green. Thank you so much for being with us today, first of all. I really appreciate it. I know you have a very busy schedule. Thanks for dropping in for the conversation.
Well, Kenny, it's a delight to be here with you and everybody who's watching this. Welcome to this conversation.
So, Gene, you're with the, I think everyone here appreciates the scholarship and the, I guess, the elevation of Wheaton College, and it seems that you're part of that ecosystem. Why don't you tell a little bit about what you do there, and then also your connection to the Native American community?
Right. Well, I've been teaching at Wheaton College in Illinois since 1996. Before that, spent 13 years in Latin America and learning about the wonderful things that God is doing among the Latin American churches and this wonderful move of God among them, the new theologies that are developing. And when I came to Wheaton, I started teaching on majority world theology, the theologies coming out of Latin America, Africa, Asia. But in 2008, something happened when God got a hold of my wife and me. And we realized that conversation about colonialism and the Christian faith and how that ends up having a strange mix is something that we needed to take a look at here in the United States. And we realized in 2008 that we as non-natives are colonists in other people's land. And we began to learn about the people of the land, where we live, and develop relationships with the Native community. It's been a wonderful journey being welcomed into that community, despite a very, very difficult history and a difficult present as well.
That's interesting. So that's a huge pivot. And then since then, you actually have been welcomed even formally. Why don't you share a little bit about this within the UMC structure, your position, and some of the things that you are active in today?
Right. Well, I think this is our story. It can be helpful for folk. When my wife and I realized that when we were growing up as children of the 1950s and 60s, our images of Native Americans came from John Wayne movies
Yes.
and Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Right.
And very stereotyped and not real at all. But then we began to read down into the history, and we began to step towards the Native community. We started to go to powwows. We started to get to know people at the American Indian Center in Chicago and develop relationships. And that has just escalated over these last years. And I think the first thing that we need to do as Methodists is understand in the 2012 acts of repentance towards healing relationships with indigenous people, the first point that the leader of this, Carol Lakota Easton, brought out was that we need to develop relationships. We need to listen. We need to reread our history, but we need to develop relationships and reach out and allow ourselves to be welcomed into the Native community. Most people that I knew didn't know any Native Americans or First Nations people or indigenous people from other lands. And it takes a very, very conscious step to seek them out and to learn their stories and to learn our mutual history.
So one of the things I think that this special Sunday, right, there's 6 special Sundays across the United Methodist Church, and one of them is designated for Native American Ministries Sunday. And that's born out of the rich history and tradition that the UMC Church has with the Native American community, right? This wasn't fabricated. It's not a PC movement. This is based on long-standing history and relationship. There's still a lot of churches, though, that have, like you said, not much interaction or education or awareness.
Right.
What's the first place that pastors and church leaders listening in today, where should they go in terms of their objective and strategy for bringing this into the congregation? Why? What's the why? And what's an outcome that they should be looking for in terms of awareness, education, appreciation with their own people and congregation?
Okay. Number one is that this isn't just about the Native community. This is about us together. We have a shared history on this land, and with every step that we take, we step upon Native soil. Where I live in Wheaton, used to be Potawatomi land, and it was ceded to the U.S. government in the Treaty of July 29th, 1829, a treaty that was signed under duress. It was sign or die. A year after that, Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act, which was an act of ethnic cleansing. And all the natives, the Potawatomi, were removed from our land. And then settlers like Jesse and Warren Wheaton came in and bought the land for 50 cents to $1.50 an acre. Where I live, my house, where my church sits, where my school is on Potawatomi land. And we need to own that history. And I think this is what the United Methodist Church has been doing these last years, since 2012, is owning the history. What the 2012 Acts of Repentance were all about was examining the Sand Creek Massacre that occurred under the leadership of Colonel Chivington, who was a United Methodist elder. We're involved in this story, but it's a story that we don't know. We as a church are also involved in what was known as the boarding school, or in Canada, the residential school movement, where we took Native children from their families and tried to scrub the culture from them, forbidding them to speak their language. We cut their hair, we took their clothes, we separated them from their families. We tried to, quote unquote, civilize them. And we tried to scrub them and make them white, basically is what happened.
Wow.
And it was a sad part in our history that we don't own. So we separated Native Americans from their land. We separated Native Americans from their lives, like the massacre at Sand Creek or Wounded Knee. And then we separated them from themselves by the residential school movement and other movements in the name of assimilation. So we've got a lot of history to own. And as one of the great Native authors, Silko, in her book Ceremony says, you know, who's going to own these stories? Who's going to take back these stories? So we as Methodists, this is our history. This is the reason we're involved in this and have Native American studies and have the acts of repentance and try to form new relationships is to begin a new history. We have to say sorry, we have to recognize, and then we've got to move forward. So there are a lot of ways to learn. One is by reading, and reading some good books, and I can give you some recommendations on those. The other way is reaching out and developing relationships with the Indian centers in your community. You can find the Native Americans. It's not hard if you just begin to look.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think many United Methodists know that there's over, I think it's almost 150 different designated Native American UMC churches across the country. And so you are right that there's resources within reach. It's just that we haven't been looking for them, right? And that if we take some time and effort, we certainly can find some resources and partners to be able to move forward in that direction.
That's true. In fact, we as Methodists even have a Native American conference in the state of Oklahoma, a whole conference that is just Native American. Again, these are our brothers and sisters in the faith, and there's even a Native American course of study for those natives who are seeking ordination within the United Methodist Church.
Now, one of the things that I've heard from a pastor or two, actually more than two pastors, have said, why should we celebrate Native American Ministries Sunday if we don't have any Native American people in our community or congregation? There's no one to lift up. It just seems a little bit artificial, pointing to something else and saying we're going to celebrate that, but we don't have any interaction. It's not indigenous into our community here. What's your response to something like that? And how do you then move to a place where it's not just negative, somber, or guilt-ridden with the history, and so that people want to use the word celebrate, right? Celebrate Native American culture. Right. How does that happen? That's some of the discussions I've had with pastors. What would you say to a pastor that comes to you like that?
Well, first off, there are Native Americans around, whether you see them or not, and they are in our communities. Now, take, for example, where I live in the state of Illinois. We have no Native American reservation there, and yet there are 100,000 Native Americans in the state of Illinois, 60,000 in the Chicagoland area. So first off, I think to say there are none around, well, maybe need to look a little harder and find the community. Secondly, as I was trying to point out, we are involved in their history. It's not just about them over there or them back then. This is our history, and this is our story. And you know, we've scrubbed Native Americans from our consciousness over the years, and we don't read well into our history, and we've forgotten the story of these relationships. So I think that it begins by finding Native Americans, recognizing that every step we take is on Native soil, but I would suggest if somebody wants to begin this journey, they need to expect that they'll receive something as well, something very, very deep. And my wife and I lived in Latin America for 13 years, and we've been changed by that experience of learning from another culture, listening to their ways, entering into their homes, seeing the faith, the gospel through their eyes. And I think what's happened in our heart is as we've listened to Native brothers and sisters, as we listen to the Native community, we've had a greater ecological consciousness because they don't pit humans against nature. They understand our intimate relationship with all the rest of God's creation. So some Native Christian friends of mine always chide me. They say, why do you start with Genesis 3? Why don't you start with Genesis 1? And so if you read somebody like a Cherokee friend of mine, his book, Randy Woodley, Dr. Randy Woodley teaches out in Oregon. His book, published by Erdman's Press, Shalom and the Community of Creation. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book that talks about indigenous worldview in relationship to Scripture and the gospel. Very, very excellent book. I think if somebody reads the books by the late Richard Twiss, a Lakota Christian leader, in his book, One Church, Many Tribes, very accessible, but it will bring up the main issues of gospel, land, and indigenous community. Yes. Or his doctoral dissertation that was reworked into a readable form, Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys, I think is a good one. So there are, Kenny, there's good things to read, there are good people to meet, and their history that we're part of still.
Now, you've been immersed in this for the last 10 years. What's one, I guess, outstanding misperception that really needs to be impacted or changed, or something that as a church in the community that they can do in terms of outreach and something meaningful?
Well, in terms of what we can do, one of the things, Kenny, that struck me over the years in working with the Native community is that when I, as a non-Native, come in and just say, tell me your story, let me listen, and without the intent of fighting or arguing, but with empathy, and the stories begin to tumble out. And they're deep stories. They're stories of pain, of loss, of resiliency, of hope. And I think that what happens as you begin to listen, you find out a lot about human life, human struggle, and also the way that Natives have had to deal with a burden that most of us don't even begin to understand.
Right.
And I think we as Christian people, we're coming up to Easter as we're recording this. And Friday was a bad day. Friday was a really, really bad day. And we thought this was the one that was going to redeem Israel.
Right.
And that bleak Saturday of confusion. But then Sunday came. And I think we're at that tragedy of the Friday with the Native community. And we need to find healing ways towards that Sunday of the resurrection. I want to see resurrection. I want to see new life, new hope, restoration of relationships and harmony. And it begins by us listening, learning, relating, talking, and educating our people.
Yeah, I love that.
Invite Native Americans in to talk. Find them.
And I think I think that metaphor is great connection to the Friday through Sunday. It's Friday, but Sunday's company, and the hope and the restoration that's possible through Jesus Christ and our kinship across the kingdom, I think, is something that we do need to focus upon. And I think that's a great suggestion for church leaders in particular that are looking at this as a consideration or as an opportunity to introduce to their own community. As we close out this interview, what's the one thing that you're looking forward to in your own work and vocation as you study further and relate further with the Native American community? What's one thing in the next couple of years that you're looking forward to?
Well, on a personal basis, my wife and I are going through a tremendous change in our lives. I'm leaving my post to Wheaton College. I will be taking up as the academic dean of NATES, an Indigenous Learning Community, formerly known as the North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies. And you can find it at nates.com, NAIITS.com. And NATES is offering master's degrees for the Indigenous communities and in Canada, First Nations people, and here in the United States. We've just started up with Australia, working with the Aboriginal community there. We're going to be working with some of the Indigenous communities in Latin America as well.
It's fantastic.
So it's kind of an exciting thing, and to be a non-native being invited in like this it's humbling beyond words, Kenny.
It must be, but it's such a huge opportunity, and I think that what you're doing is just fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and I think providing that perspective and just that push, I think, is really healthy, and I just love it. It's life-serving for, I think, the people that are listening into our conversation today. If someone wants to get in touch with you personally after today's interview, what's the best way that they can do to reach out to you directly?
Very good. You can always find me on my blog site, Gene Green, Gene Green, all one word, .org. And also, you can email me. Feel free to do that at ggreen, G, and then green like in the color, at nates.com, NAIITS.com. And I'd welcome any conversation. If I can help anybody out, I'm here to serve you. And as a member of the United Methodist Church.
I love the fact that within the UMC ecosystem, we have someone like you that has been just so generous with your work, but also with your time today. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
For everybody listening in, we'd love to hear what you think, and please keep on dropping those comments below. This is a place for us to interact, engage, and learn together. This is something that we are offering as a walkthrough, a journey, as we continue to talk to different people involved with Native American Ministries Sunday in the United Methodist community. Thank you so much for stopping by and being a part of what we're trying to do together here on the internet. So we really appreciate you chiming in. Please share this with other people so that we can get the word out about Native American Ministries Sunday. Till next time, thank you so much. We'll catch you here. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, hey, everybody. This is Kenny Jahng with our United Methodist tour across the country, talking to ministries that are celebrating Native American Ministries Sunday. This is a special Sunday that the entire church celebrates. You may or may not have heard about it, but today I'm actually fortunate and glad to introduce to you a woman. Cynthia Mosley is dialing in from St. John UMC in New Jersey. Welcome to the show today, Cynthia.
Thank you. It's good to visit with you about this topic.
Yeah, so we're excited to talk to you because we've had some people that are congregants and pastors, and today I'd love to introduce St. John because it falls into a category of a designated congregation. Can you tell us a little bit about St. John? How large is it, or the history, or just what's the makeup of the congregation?
Yes, we're about 90% Native American, the Nanaco, Lenape tribe, although we have other tribal people from the community who join us. We have been in existence for 176 years.
Wow.
We're the fifth oldest Native American congregation in Methodism in the United States, and we just celebrated receiving an official designation from the conference.
Wow, that's pretty neat to have. And so this must be a rich history and tradition there. And the fact that you just have 90%, I think that's going to afford us a quite interesting conversation today. So I'm sure that Native American Ministries Sunday, which is one of the 6 special Sundays across the church, is something that many congregations host and celebrate on a periodic basis. But you guys must have a lot of elements of the Native American culture that get weaved into your worship and liturgy and your church life throughout the year. I want you to tell us a little bit about that and how that might be different than some of the church experiences that some of the people listening into our conversation today might have on a regular Sunday.
Yes, Kenny, we celebrate every Sunday our heritage, and that's included with maybe a liturgy or a hymn, and of course artwork in our sanctuary, such as our 7-foot wampum cross, which is a very special blessing to our worship. We also have a number of other art presentations in our sanctuary that you will know it's a Native church when you come in. I also want to share that we go to our annual conference through the Committee on Native American Ministries, and we encourage everyone in our whole conference to worship on Native American Sunday in their own special way. That can be a small way to start with, a baby step way with a liturgy, to all the way to having our drummers and dancers visit you on that date. Oftentimes we do not celebrate on the date of in our church because we're out engaging other churches on that particular Sunday.
Oh, I love the fact that you're going out and helping and having relationships with other churches about it. That's fantastic.
Yes, and it's our desire that the discipline requirement to have Native American Sunday, no matter what date you have it, and no matter what materials you use, but you do take that opportunity to recognize all of the ethnicities within the United Methodist Church.
Now, so this is a great chance for churches and leadership in churches to introduce some cultural exchange and learning about the diversity across our country. Part of this is also the offering that gets taken up on that special Sunday across thousands of churches, and that gets pulled together and invested in many different ministries. One of them is investing in education and things like that. Have you or any of your congregation been a beneficiary of any of those funds that are collected and being able to pass forward for Native American ministry?
Absolutely. Just a few examples are training opportunities, not only for us adults, but also for our youth who get to attend such conferences. The Peg Leg Flamingos conference is coming up in May, and they were able to go out, the youth were able to go out to South Dakota, North Dakota border with the pipeline issue that we were all fighting last year. And we stay active with water issues across the nation through CONAM and Native American Sunday Ministries. Those monies have been very beneficial, and they also help with vacation Bible schools in the Native communities. They help with scholarships to students to go to college. There's almost no limit to that as long as those dollars are being used for the Native American growth.
Wow, so it's really edifying to hear the investment that the church is able to make in communities like yours. There's been a long-standing history in relationship and support with the Native American brothers and sisters between the UMC within our church. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or how large of a footprint there is in terms of Native Americans within the UMC or in this country?
Well, I understand there are 124 designated Native American churches that maybe give or take more. There's a large concentration in the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference. There's 18, I believe, in that area in Oklahoma, but they're scattered all throughout. Michigan, there's 9. California, there's another handful. The largest one is in Anaheim, which is a very large Native American church there. So we feel that it's stretching and reaching all over our country, and that only comes from us educating others that we are still here, that we're not gone. We haven't somehow been moved or hidden or tucked away to be forgotten. The Methodist Church does recognize us and sees that we are here.
You must be talking to a lot of people and helping to bring awareness to many other people. What's one of the, I guess, misconceptions or things that you come across commonly in when you're introducing the culture for the first time for people who may not have any interactions with Native Americans in their own neighborhood or in their own life?
Basically, they're not aware that Native Americans still exist. I don't know where they think we went, but I guess they think we just have melted into the other cultures. But we are remaining very distinct. We still have daytime jobs in the business world. We are teachers. We are professors. We are social workers. We are, many of us, nurses. So we still function in the mainstream, but most of us continue to keep a thread of our culture. And so we'd like to be able to say that Christian and Native life can come together and form a beautiful thing through the United Methodist Church.
Now, in terms of Native American, I guess the makeup, the faith profile, I believe UMC, Methodism, is one of the larger Protestant denominations on reservations and in communities like yours. Is that true? Or what does the actual, faith makeup look like for Native Americans across the country?
I can't tell you that totally, but I know that United Methodists maintain the largest enrollment on reservations and in Native communities, whether they're reservations or not, because we're technically not a reservation here in New Jersey, but we have the largest number of Native Americans enrolled in the Methodist Church. So you're right about that. There are those that have not come to a Christian life, and that's another percentage of Native Americans. And there are a few other small denominations, but because of the missionary work and the continued mission work in such places as the Blackfoot Reservation, Methodists are well known to Native peoples. And my ancestor chose to be Methodist because it lined up so much with the beliefs that they already had. So
really? So there seems to be some alignment. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
It was certainly the belief in the Creator, the first of all, and the belief in respect and love for one another and love for nature, and understanding that we were all one family. And my grandfather made that decision many years ago that was the path he wanted to follow. And we're one of those families that were original in our community as Methodists. So I suppose I'll still be here till the sky cracks open. And
yeah, so many people that I've talked to in this journey, talking to Native American Ministries Sunday participants, talk about how their first introduction to Christianity and Jesus Christ started with conversations with the fact that there's this respect and honor for divinity and creation.
Yes.
And that tends to be a starting point in conversation as they then come to faith in Jesus Christ. It's kind of beautiful to see that happen in so many different ways across the different, states of the country, that there's a commonality in how we are embracing the conversation with each other. Now, one of the things that I've heard from other people that it is within the Native American culture, there's such diversity in itself. It's not just binary that you're Native American or not. Have you seen your youth be able to be exposed to the diversity or travel or meet other Native Americans across the country within the UMC system?
Well, yes, and the Peg Leg Flamingos, which is a youth group that's based between the Northeast and also the North Central. So we have a very good dialogue and physical exchange, and the youth meet together every other year from these two areas. We were in South Dakota last year, North Dakota area. This year they're coming to Maryland. So we're anxious to see them. Of course, Northeast jurisdiction also gives us an opportunity to meet with our other 4 tribes in the Northeast jurisdiction, and the youth have that chance as well. So there is some ways, and then we try to take them on training even further than that. It's a little difficult with their school schedules, but they have had that opportunity to go as far as the West Coast area.
Wow, that's great. And then in our pre-interview talk, you were talking about the fact that you take pride in manning that table at the annual conference. And so tell us a little bit about that activity. I think it's great when we have our own advocates and champions within our own community try to lift things up and share and educate one another. Tell us a little bit about that experience. How has it been? How have other churches received that message and interaction as you've manned that table at the conference over the years?
Very good question. I guess your listeners understand that 50% of the NAM's offering goes to the Committee on Native American Ministries to manage. And so the Native American Ministries Committee believes that it needs to share with others. So at every annual conference, we man a table with materials, booklets, etc., giveaways, but most of all ourselves. We're there. And we talk to people and say, listen, have you scheduled your Native American Sundays event yet? And if they haven't, we talk about how they can do that. And sometimes they'll say to me, we didn't know we had to do that. I said, well, in the discipline, it says that we are to share that time together to honor the Native American diversity in our church. So they're usually pretty surprised about it. But as we're there more years now, they come back to tell us what they did. And we know we're making some inroads.
Yeah, and I'm sure you hear the same thing, is that once a church starts to do it one year, they continue to do it. It's not like they do it once, they forget about it. You got churches that become enthusiastic about it year after year, right?
That's really true. And I think the best way to get that result is to start with baby steps. And maybe you just have a liturgy and some prayers and maybe a little music in the background. And pretty soon you get to liking that. And then you say, well, let's expand a little. And then before you know it, you're having drumming and dancing just like we do.
Well, let's talk about that particularly. If a church leader listening in today wanted to take that step and jump in and schedule a Native American Ministries Sunday, what's the first thing that you think they really should, what literally is the first step, 1, 2, 3 that they should be thinking about?
I would suggest that we try to have a initial small beginning, a small start. So that's not overwhelming, because I've seen that happen too, where they want to do it all the first time and it's too much. So what we do is to suggest they get materials that give some ideas for prayers and liturgies and hymns. They also should look to see if there's a Native American Methodist Church in their community. Many people may not know that. And again, some conferences aren't so fortunate to have one in their community, but most are able to find that resource and use that church as their resource. If there's a Committee on Native American Ministries active in the area, that should be a second resource. And of course, the things that are on the website.
Wow, that's great. And so again, just a reminder, United Methodist Communications at umcom.org has tons of resources. They actually have a church leader download kit available with so many digital downloads, social media graphics, infographics, videos, bulletin inserts, worship planning guides, etc., as well as UMCOM offers printed envelopes and bulletin inserts as well that any church can order for free at United Methodist Communications. So just want to make sure that everyone watching today knows that the church is here to support your local efforts, and it's great to have people like Cynthia here available as a resource. Now, Cynthia, if someone was watching today and wants to reach out to you and ask you a couple of questions, what's the best way that they could do that?
Well, I'm going to share my email address. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
cmosley19@hotmail.com. And I promise to answer you back. We're always willing to work with other churches because we believe that we're part of one big family, and we'd like to be part of everyone's family and let them know that we are still here.
Well, Cynthia, you are a gift to the church. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to stop by today and share with us a little bit about the unique ministry that you have here in Jersey, just the historic ministry that you guys keep on marching on with. I appreciate everything that you're doing for us and for the church.
Thank you so much.
Well, everybody chiming in, I would love for you to jump in with comments and let us know what your questions are about Native American Ministries Sunday. Again, you can find out more information at the UM Communications website with all the resources and details there. Cynthia Mosley, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll check you here next time with another interview as we go across the country visiting ministries and talking about Native American Ministries Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us. Catch you next time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the program. If you're just joining us, you got to turn up your volume. Make sure that you're following along because we've got a great conversation ahead of us today. Thank you so much for joining us for our journey across the country as we talk about the United Methodist Church special Sunday called the Native American Ministries Sunday, NAMS as it's finally called by many people across our country. Today, I'm fortunate to have with us a special guest, Michael John Resler, who's part of Ashland First United Methodist Church in Wisconsin. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Michael John, first of all, really appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule to stop in and share with us a little bit of the experiences that you have at your church. First, just let's orient ourselves to what you're doing in Wisconsin. Tell us a little bit about your church. How big is it? What does it look like on a given Sunday? Tell us a little bit about, if we were to walk into your church, what would we see?
Ashland First United Methodist we have about 100, 120 registered families. And on any given Sunday, we have about 25 to 40 in attendance. And then on special Sundays, we have a higher turnout. We're about 2 blocks from Lake Superior, so it's in the mornings. It's a great scene getting ready for service to have that creation and the sunrise coming up over the lake. It's beautiful. We're very community oriented. We have a lot of outreach opportunities in the area. We work with a lot of different churches and some other community organizations, and just to try to build up the kingdom in any way we can.
That's great. That's great. And so, and tell us a little bit about your role. What's your role at the church right now?
My main role is youth pastor, and I'm also assigned as outreach coordinator.
Great. So, Michael John, tell us a little. Also, how long have you been at this church in particular?
I've been with Ashland First for about 4 years now.
Great, great. And during that time, the last 4 years, how has your church been involved with Native American Ministries Sundays the whole time that you've been there?
My whole 4 years we have. The first year I was there, I was actually approached to preach on the Native American Ministries Sunday. So that's been my role every year since then, is to preach on Native American Ministries Sunday.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And so I like the fact that you've been personally involved at the center of it. And you yourself have background connection to the Native American culture, right?
That's correct. I'm Ojibwe from the local reservation about 10 miles east of us.
And so this is a little bit different for most churches in that you have that proximity to a reservation. Do you have that interaction? Tell us a little bit about what happens on that special Sunday in your church.
Well, on special Sunday, usually in advance, we reach out to the church on the reservation and get some members to come into Ashland. And usually what we do is for the service, we have like a kind of a creation-based spirituality, call to worship, and some songs that gear towards the Creator and not so much God, but the Creator and all of creation. And then we have participation in the service by our visiting members, get up, introduce themselves, say a few words, what Methodism means to them and whatnot. We have a couple Native American youth that come up and share with us their gift of song. And then we usually close with a blessing in our native tongue.
Wow. And what percentage or proportion of your congregation is actually Native American?
We only have one family that's Native American in Ashland.
Great. And so introducing those cultural elements. I guess maybe you can tell me the perspective of you yourself and the family that actually has that heritage, as well as those that don't. Can you tell me both of those experiences and perspectives of those families when they're introduced to this type of liturgy on Sunday?
Before my arrival, there used to be a really good connection between Ashland and Odena, the church on the reservation. But then the previous pastor, when he left, that kind of fell by the wayside. So these last 4 years, we've been picking up that relationship again. And listening to some of the members, the non-native members, they miss that interaction. And that first year I was there, I actually know the family that is Native American. And so when I introduced them, the non-native membership was surprised that there was a native family in their midst. And so we have, since I preach about once a month now as youth pastor, I try to incorporate some of our tradition and our styles into my preaching style, so they get it. The non-native community gets more familiarized with the culture and tradition monthly than just the Native American Ministries Sunday,
That's fabulous. Yeah. And so in your role also as youth pastor there, tell us a little about the youth. What are the types of the interactions or experience that they have with that special Sunday? I would assume that that's something that is not the norm for most youth or kids in that area to be exposed to those types of cultural elements outside of church typically.
Right. Most of the population in the school district it's about 60-40, 60 non-native, 40% native. So they have some interaction in the school system with Native Americans, but what that really means, they really don't know what it means to be Native American and what a culture and tradition is. So in my youth group time, especially around this time and then in November, I introduced some fun activities, cross-cultural activities, some games and stuff like that to introduce to our non-native students so they get a better understanding and appreciation of their peers. And so that builds down some walls and more communication, and it gets them an experience that they probably wouldn't any other place.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the fact that it's the church where this all is happening for this next generation, right? This is just, it's a sense of pride, I think, for the UMC church to be able to be part of that experience for developing youth in any given neighborhood or area. So for those that are not native, and we're talking to churches, and churches across the country are listening in on this type of conversation, there are a lot of churches that have not had the experience or the opportunity to celebrate Native American Ministries Sunday in their own congregation. They might be considering it for the first time listening to this conversation. What are some of the resources that you could point to or maybe suggest that they look at when they're talking about celebrating it for the first time? What's the low-hanging fruit? What's the one or two first things that they should consider when they're trying to host a Native American Ministry Sunday?
Well, just before Native American Ministries Sunday, usually the conference sends out email, and you go to a website, and they have a lot of really good resources there on the website. And that's when I first started. That's where I went and got some materials there. And from there, I did my own. They helped me. They planted the seed and helped me do my own investigation. And so now I have my own pile of resources that I draw from. But it originally started with what the church sent me.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is United Methodist Communications on their website has a whole pastor's kit and a download kit for churches that have infographics and social media and actually a planner, bulletin inserts, posters. There's tons of videos. There's tons of resources available for free for any church leader to go and peruse those resources, learn more about Native American Ministry Sunday, and actually download those resources to use locally. I'm so glad that you've taken the opportunity to benefit from that. Once that Sunday happens, what happens throughout the year? Is there any other echoes or any fruit that comes from being exposed to this culture and understanding how the United Methodist Church actually supports the ministries within the Native American communities across the country?
Yeah, once when I first started, I thought it was just a one-time thing, a one Sunday interaction with the local community. But throughout the year, we interact because of that one Sunday. Throughout the year, we interact quite regularly with the Native American community through different festivities, activities, even at the mission church on the reservation. We've gone out and assisted with them in different things. And in the summertime, we have I created a workshop, a group where we come out, different members from the church in Ashland, we come out and do work projects on the reservation.
Nice.
So there's that continuing education and that continuing relationship throughout the year, not just the one Sunday deal.
Gotcha. In terms of the actual special Sunday, do you celebrate other special Sundays throughout the year, or is this the only one that you guys host?
This is the only one that we host because it's because of the unique relationship we have with the local community. But now that Ashland is getting more diverse, we're looking at our pastoral team. We're looking at some other special Sundays to incorporate throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of churches also question is that, do we need to do all special Sundays? Can we cherry pick? Can we just dip our toe into the waters and adopt one at a time? And I think that's exactly what you seem to be experiencing with your church. We want to encourage pastors and church leaders that are listening in today to really just take that bias for action and go for it for one special Sunday. And this might be the one to really try out, because it's a interesting one. It's one that has a lot of resources behind it. It has a lot of history for what the UMC does in terms of Cross the Connection. And so I love the fact that you guys are taking it one step at a time. Now, if you were talking to a pastor today and they said, hey, look, I'm gonna go for it this year and host a special Sunday for Native American Ministries Sunday, what's one or two things that you might counsel them in terms of things that they can talk about in the actual sermon or the worship service? And what's that takeaway in terms of some of the messaging that you want to give to the people when they come to church that Sunday?
If they have a local Native American community in their area, my first recommendation would be to reach out to them and start a dialogue with them in advance and incorporate them into the worship service and go from there. It's a wonderful experience. It's one thing to talk about Native American Ministries Sunday, but then if you have actual Native Americans in it, it brings the service, it heightens the service. But if you don't have a community close by, there's a lot of, my first recommendation is do your research, because there's a lot of different books and resources out there that can paint Native Americans in various different lights.
Right.
Draw from, do your research, and then if you're in your message or in your service, especially in the service, you don't want to, my recommendation is not to go too far, because it can fall flat. So incorporate little, I know in the Methodist hymnal, there are some Native American songs in there in
Yes.
the language. So I'd pick one of them to incorporate into the service first. And then in your message, talk about, incorporate the history, and there's a lot of parallels between Methodist and Christian culture and heritage and Native American culture and heritage. So draw a message from the parallels, the similarities we share.
Now, some churches take the opportunity to prepare in front of the church by the altar or the pulpit, display of foods or other artifacts from the culture. Is that something that you have done in the past?
Yes, we do. We actually have by our pulpit and our altar, we have a lot of Native American art and symbols relating to the local community. And so it makes them feel welcomed when they come into service. And it's great talking points throughout the service. So like I said, if you have a Native community close by, that's another way to incorporate them. But if you don't, also get some of that to incorporate into the service too, because it's an education experience, especially if this is your first time doing a special Sunday. So get some art and whatnot, and it's great talking points for your community.
Now, are there ways to get the actual congregation involved? Is it just you as a pastor leading worship and planning it all, or do you have other volunteers or staff members or anybody else involved? What are some of the ways that you might think of involving congregation members in pulling together or planning this special Sunday?
Well, last year for Native American Ministries Sunday, we focused on the youth. So it was youth, both Native and non-Native youth participated in the service, and we focused on the creation stories, the Christian creation story and the local Native American creation story. And so the youth, I pulled the youth in, and they helped me plan and participate and execute the Sunday service. And that was really moving, especially for the older generation, to see this next generation coming in, and that educational piece and that unifying piece for them. So I think my first year I did everything by myself, but the last 3 years I've been reaching out to different community members and utilizing their gifts and talents.
And so has that been a difficult task to loop other people in your church, or have you seen any pushback in terms of why are we celebrating this, or this is something we should not prioritize over other Sundays or other topics? Have you had any difficulties in gaining that momentum over the last couple of years?
No, actually, no. Like I said, because of the relationship that once was with the local Native American community, and that, that had gone by the wayside. So these last 4 years, we've been rebuilding on that. So there's been a lot of success and encouragement. We need to keep doing this. We need to keep doing this. So I haven't had any pushback at all. It's difficult to say no to people. There's so many people that want to help. It's like there's only so many things we can do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's overwhelming the experience that most churches have, is that once they raise their hand and say, hey, we're going to commit to doing this, that people come out of the woodwork, and you'll see that actually, I think people that typically aren't involved sometimes come out and actually find this as a vehicle for them to put their faith into action and serve the church in new ways. And I think it's pretty encouraging to some pastors to see that happen organically.
Yes.
What as we close out this interview, what's one remaining tip or two that you can offer to people that are on the fence and say, hey, we've got so much going on. This is just yet another task to put onto my plate. I don't know if I'm ready to do this, or I don't know if this is worth doing. What can you do to appeal to them, to that person right now listening into the conversation who's on that fence, and how do you tip him in the favor of celebrating Native American Ministry Sunday?
I can only speak to when I was approached 4 years ago to lead this service. I was kind of on the fence.
Really?
Growing up in the area and knowing a lot of the community, it's one thing, about the prophet coming home. It's like, well, but in talking with the local community and the encouragement I did receive from both the church and the Native American community, I look back at it now, and I'm grateful that I did step out and do this, because both of our congregations have grown closer together because of this, but also have grown in numbers because of this. And it brings another awareness to the Native American community.
That's interesting. So you're saying that you've had more people come through the doors. Do people actually use this as an opportunity to invite their friends and family? Do you announce it ahead of time, and that's what people do?
We've started 2 weeks ago with announcements and putting it in bulletins and on social media about Native American Ministries Sunday.
Great. And you're finding you do find newcomers that come through the door on that Sunday?
Oh, yes, very much so.
That's very uplifting to hear. So those are great tips, and I really appreciate you sharing the experience with us. Just one other thing is the history of the United Methodist Church and the Native American community is long-standing. Can you share, just as we close this out, just one of the reasons from your vantage point or from your heart of why it's so important for that relationship to continue? Why is it important for the UMC to really be seen standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder with Native Americans across this country in this day and age as a ministry partner?
It shows, for me, it shows solidarity. You know, there's been some ups and downs in the history between United Methodists and Native Americans, but through all the years, they've still had that appreciation, that relationship, that positive relationship, and it shows solidarity. You know, when our children go to church and they learn, I think this is a great opportunity for our next generation to continue learning about others other than themselves, and it's a great support system. It's just a wonderful support system, and I think it needs to continue.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing those personal thoughts and reflections on that important subject. For everybody here listening, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen into this conversation. As you can tell, this is one church in Wisconsin that is really committed to supporting this aspect of the relationship across the connection in a very localized way. And there's so many different ways to express it. And this church in particular has found a way to benefit from it personally for the actual ministry, but also outside in the community in relationship with the churches locally in the reservation that are Native. So this is just another piece of encouragement for you listening in. If you're a church or a church leader that has not yet taken that step forward in faith and started to celebrate Native American Ministries Sundays, we invite you to check out the resources available. The first place, as Michael Jahng has said, is look at the United Methodist Communications website and search for the resources on Native American Ministries Sundays. You'll see a whole wealth of downloadable resources that are professionally designed that really make it low-hanging fruit, pretty much done for you to plan out that specific Sunday, for planning it, for hosting it, even for follow-up. A lot of resources that you can download and use yourself. And you heard from Michael Jahng here today that he himself, Michael Jahng, took those resources himself and started to build his own library and collection of resources as well. So thank you so much for listening in. Thank you, Michael Jahng, for spending some time with us today, and really blessings on you and your celebration coming forth for Native American Ministry Sunday.
Thank you.